The Powered Paragliding Show, brought to you in conjunction with Paramotor Magazine, with your hosts, Michael Purdy, Jeff Going, and Paul Anthem.
Let's fly away! Welcome to the Powered Paragliding Show. I'm Michael Purdy, here with Jeff Going and Paul Anthem. How you doing, guys?
Awesome.
I'm doing great here in Dayton, Ohio.
Alrighty, well, we've got some fun topics today. We're going to start out in this segment talking about landing touchdown. Jeff was observing, I guess, a training session and was kind of surprised at what you saw, huh?
Yeah, the question is, what about the touchdown? The last few seconds of flying is so important for being able to stand up, obviously, and the seconds before it are even more important. So the subject is, how should a beginner do the landing touchdown, and how should a more advanced pilot approach it? So my observation is that you don't want to have any break at all, basically. Maybe just feeling the least amount of pressure, maybe pressure 1, which is not even the weight of your arms, just a couple pounds at the most. And then as you're coming in at maybe 10 feet, that's when you start bringing in some brake. And then as when you start the brake, the point of the landing flare is to get your body swinging. It's actually that change in angle of attack of your body swinging that does most of the work of reducing your descent and slowing yourself down. So,
well, that's if you're doing a good landing. You know, that you reach for that, and ideally you come in, you start to flare, you pendulum forward a little bit, and then you come in and land. But that's not necessarily the way it always happens. I mean, you see lots of guys just flaring to touchdown without a swing.
Right.
You know?
And if you give it a whole bunch of brake, the problem is you're adding a lot of drag, and that's giving up energy. Your goal in a landing is to convert the forward energy into a decrease in speed so that your touchdown is the slowest, and the pendulum helps. So the goal of this technique, where you give it some brake at 10 feet, allow yourself to swing forward, is that now you're not killing a bunch of speed on the wing, but you are starting the pendulum, because that's really the point of the flare, is to start your body swinging forward, increasing the angle of attack, slowing your descent, and slowing your forward speed. And so you give it the brake to maybe a quarter or half, start the swing, and then give it the rest of the brake after your body has swung forward. So it's sort of a two-part process. Half swing, and then the rest of the brake to stop as you come down.
That's a good point, Jeff. It really is a two-part process, because I've heard a lot of people say that just one gradual motion down. But I like to tell some beginners, not that I'm an instructor or anything, that, a little too high, a little, 10 or 15 feet up, give it a little bit of brake, just what you said. That also helps you gauge how much you're going to slow down, how much, because remember, this is a new pilot, how much pulling it 8 inches down is going to, you can feel the momentum stop.
And hopefully,
I was going to say, you want to look at it from the side. And if you do that, you'll clearly see if that happens or not. And I like to use video in my training. And this is one of the areas that is really works well with it, because you can see if they're penduluming or not.
Swinging.
And, swinging. Yeah, you can see that. You can also, there are other problems as well, like lots of people that just, they do everything right, but they just plant their feet and fall forward, which is, a fairly common thing, even if you talk about it. So,
yeah.
But I find video helps that a lot. The other thing Bob Armand taught me a long time ago was to stick one leg out. Have the students stick one leg out, and that reminds them that they need to walk.
Well, that's good advice.
That's a good idea.
I think a lot of people, they try to do the brake too early, and the idea is you do not want to slow down before you do that initial pull. And the other idea is to remember that initial pull is to start your body penduluming. So you want to get the two-part process where you brake, swing, then brake. And
you want to use as little energy as possible. You want to save some energy, for a little energy in the bank. I saw a guy at Moe's flying a few years ago, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This guy came in, he was flying I think it was a Fresh Breeze or something, but he'd never flown with anyone else after his instruction. And he came down and he flared down to like his ankles every time. And when he touched ground, the wing immediately just fell apart. Ugh. And so I talked to him. I said, and I kind of pointed it out. And he goes, no one's ever told me that before. And he corrected it immediately. But he'd been flying that way literally for years.
I tell you, I can't wait to get these videos out because I'm going to show, primarily I'm not going to show the normal technique so much. I may reference it, but I'm going to show the next thing that I wanted to introduce was what are some of the more advanced things that you can do on landing. Namely, it's about energy management. You want to come in and do a slide. That's number one. It's so much fun to do it. And you can come in and do this power off. The primary method is you come in and you slow down. For the beginner pilot, we're recommending, of course, just basically hands up with minimal brake pressure. But if you want to make it more noticeable, then you slow way down, and at about 40 feet, depending on your wing, if you're on a reflex wing, you can do this for higher. On a regular wing, you need to be lower. You let off on the brakes and dive. Let the wing dive, and you want to plan it so that at the bottom or near the bottom of that swing, there's the ground. And so you just touch your feet on the ground and slide along, pulling brake to keep the pressure the same.
Now
So you're talking about actually sliding as opposed to just sort of coming in like the skydivers do in like a J landing or whatever.
Next. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just saying I've seen you do that before, Jeff, and you have to time that and judge the distance just right.
Yeah, that's why you definitely don't want this to be a beginner thing, because if you misjudge that, you let off on the brakes and you're too low, and you don't give it some brake to start the pendulum. Let's say you let off on the brake, you start the dive, and then you realize, oh, hey, the ground's going to intervene before the bottom. Maybe I should pull some brake. Well, if you don't make that realization, you're going to pound in. So this is definitely not something you want to do until you've got 100 flights or more. But man, is it fun. I flew a reflex wing at, I think it was not the Kankakee flying, but Don's. And this reflex wing, APCO, they finally got a wing that I like. I shouldn't say that. They've got a lot of good wings, but in a reflex wing, they've got a good reflex wing, and they have a lot of energy and a lot of speed. So I let off on the brake, and that thing dove like crazy, and I came down. I had enough energy with the motor off to slide along the ground, pick the ball up, climb about 5 feet, and then make a landing with the ball. That was cool.
Wow.
So the last little bit about it is sort of what you mentioned with the skydivers. There's one thing I don't think we're going to have time to cover, but the technique what the skydivers do is they come in a bank, and they use that energy of the turn to do a slider along the ground. And it looks really cool, and it's really dangerous. Think about half of the skydiver deaths happen with a fully inflated wing. But by coming out of it in a bank, you have that much more energy, and you can absorb that energy as you roll out. But that's something, again, be really comfortable with energy management, banks, rolling out of banks at altitude before you try any of that stuff.
Right. Very interesting, though. It's just like our sport. It's pretty easy to do, but it's a lot of work to master. And I think this new thing you're working on is going to go a long way towards that. But anyway, we're out of time. Listening to the Powered Paragliding Show. Michael Purdy, Jeff Going, and Paul Henry.
Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.